Psilocybin versus meth, the spiritual difference nobody is talking about. There are two substances that alter consciousness so profoundly that people who use them describe feeling like different people. One has been used in ceremony for 9,000 years. The other was synthesized in a lab 100 years ago. We made the ancient one a felony. And we let the new one flood every small town in America. That is not an accident. By the end of this, you are going to understand something that sits at the intersection of neuroscience, shamanic tradition, and the hidden architecture of what we call addiction. You are going to see why some substances open doors to healing and why others open doors to things that do not want you to heal. And once you see the difference, you will understand why our entire cultural conversation about drugs is not just wrong, it is backwards. Stay with me. Let us start with a word you have heard 1,000 times. Alcohol. You think you know what it means. But the etymology tells a different story. The word comes from the Arabic al-Kuhl, which originally referred to a fine metallic powder, used as an eye cosmetic. But in alchemical and spiritual texts, Al-Kuhl meant something else, a body-eating spirit, the essence that remains when something material is burned away. And if you trace the lineage further, you'll find the word ghoul, an entity that consumes the living. The name itself is a warning. And for thousands of years, spiritual traditions across the world have known what modern neuroscience is only now beginning to map, that certain substances do not just change your brain chemistry, they change what is speaking through you. In Hindu spiritual science, substances are categorized by their effect on consciousness. Alcohol is classified as tomaraja, a substance that increases both spiritual darkness and restless activity simultaneously. According to this framework, alcohol does not just lower inhibitions, it creates gaps in the energetic field around the mind. And through those gaps, what they call discarnate entities, fragments of consciousness without bodies, can enter. You have felt this if you have ever had a blackout. You were walking, talking, making decisions. Your body was moving through the world. But when you woke up, you had no memory of it. The question nobody wants to ask is this: if you were not conscious, who was? You were awake. Someone was driving, but it was not you. The shamanic traditions have a word for this. They call it possession, and they do not mean it metaphorically. Now, stay with that discomfort for a moment. Because this is not about moralizing. It is about understanding what is actually happening beneath the surface of what we call addiction. Most people think addiction is about the substance, that it is a matter of chemical hooks in the brain. And yes, that is part of it. But here is where it gets strange. Because if you talk to people deep in meth addiction, or heroin addiction, or alcohol addiction, and you ask them about the voice that calls them back, they will tell you something that does not fit the brain disease model. They will tell you the craving does not feel like their desire. It feels like something else, wanting. Like something using them to get what it needs. The Hikal people of Mexico, who have worked with peyote ceremonially for millennia, have a framework for this. They say that addiction is not a disease of the body, or even the mind, it is a spiritual infestation. That when you use certain substances outside of sacred context, without protection, or without guidance, without intention, you create an opening, and something comes through. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually. A presence that begins to whisper, that begins to want, and after a while, you cannot tell where you end, and it begins. The craving at 3 in the morning, the one that makes you get in the car, even though you swore you would not, that is not you. That is the thing that has been feeding. If this is landing for you, if you have never heard someone name this part of the experience before, hit subscribe, because we go this deep every single week. No fluff, no surface level recovery talk, just the stuff that actually touches the truth of what is happening. Now, back to what I was saying. Because this is where the science and the sacred start to speak the same language. Methamphetamine is a synthetic compound. It has no lineage, no earth origin, no tradition of elders passing down the knowledge of how to approach it safely. It was created in a lab in Japan in 1919 and used by militaries to keep soldiers awake and compliant. It works by flooding the synapse with dopamine, not 2 times the normal amount, not 10 times, 1,000 times above baseline. It hijacks the brain reward system so completely that food, sex, connection, meaning, all of it becomes gray noise compared to the signal of the drug. Neuroscientists describe it as overriding the limbic system. But here is what they do not say. When you overwrite the part of the brain responsible for meaning-making, for bonding, for recognizing what matters, what is left is not human anymore. You are still walking around, still talking, but the thing that made you has been displaced. And something else is running the system. Now let us talk about the other side. Psilocybin. The sacred mushroom. In the Mazatec tradition of southern Mexico, it is called Tionanecatal, the flesh of the gods. It has been used in ceremony for at least 9,000 years, not for escape, not for forgetting, for contact with the divine, with the ancestors, with the part of yourself that knows what you have forgotten. Maria Sabina, the Mazatec healer who reluctantly shared the mushroom ceremonies with Westerners in the 1950s, described it this way. The mushroom speaks, and our ancestors speak through them. They come to heal what is broken. This is not recreational, this is sacrament, this is medicine in the oldest sense of the word. And here is the thing, the science is catching up. Johns Hopkins has been researching psilocybin for over 2 decades now, and what they have found is this. The intensity of the mystical experience during a psilocybin session directly predicts the depth of healing afterward. The more profound the sense of unity, of sacredness, of encountering something beyond the self, the greater the reduction in depression, anxiety, addiction, existential distress. In their studies with terminal cancer patients, a single high-dose psilocybin session produced sustained reductions in death anxiety and depression that lasted for years. One session, because it was not about suppressing symptoms, it was about contact with something real, with something that reorients the entire system toward meaning. But here's the crucial distinction that nobody talks about. Context is everything. Psilocybin, taken alone in a dark room at 2 in the morning to escape your life, is not the same as psilocybin taken in ceremony with intention, preparation, and a guide. One is medicine. The other is just another way to disappear. The substance itself is not inherently good or evil. But the way you approach it, the why, the how, that determines whether you are opening a door to healing, or opening a door to something else. Indigenous traditions have always known this. That is why there are protocols, fasting prayer, the presence of an elder who holds the space. These are not just rituals for the sake of ritual, they are protection. They are the container that makes it safe to go that deep. Roland Griffiths, the lead researcher at Johns Hopkins, who passed away in 2023, said this before he died. These experiences are among the most profound and meaningful experiences people have in their entire lives. They rate them on par with the birth of a child or the death of a parent. He was not talking about getting high. He was talking about touching the sacred, about remembering who you are beneath the layers of trauma and conditioning and fear. And that is what psilocybin does when it is used with intention. It does not give you a false sense of meaning. It reconnects you to the meaning that was always there. Now contrast that with meth, with the needle at 3 a.m. in a gas station bathroom, with the pipe in the car behind the grocery store. There is no ceremony there, no guide, no intention beyond, I need to not feel this anymore. And that is the opening, that is the gap, because the energy you bring to a substance matters. The tamaraja quality of alcohol that the Hindu texts describe, the way it darkens consciousness and invites in what should not be there, that is amplified 1,000-fold with something like meth. It does not connect you to the divine. It severs you from everything that makes life worth living and replaces it with a synthetic simulation of euphoria. And once you have felt that simulation, once it has rewritten your dopamine system, the real world looks like a wasteland. Food tastes like cardboard. Music sounds flat. The people you love feel like shadows. Because the drug has become the only thing that registers as real. But here is what gives me hope, and here is why this conversation matters. Because if addiction is at least partly a spiritual infestation, if the craving is not entirely yours, then recovery is not just about willpower, it's about reclaiming your space. It is about closing the doors that were opened, and remembering what belongs to you, and what does not. The traditions that work with plant medicines understand this. Ayahuasca ceremonies in the Amazon often begin with the shaman blowing mapacho smoke over participants to clear attached energies. Iboga ceremonies in West Africa are described as a spiritual reset, a deep purging of what does not belong. These are not metaphors. These are technologies that indigenous people have refined over millennia for exactly this work, and the science is finally starting to listen. Studies on ibogaine for opioid addiction show that a single treatment can interrupt cravings for months. Not because it is another opiate replacement, but because it seems to reset the system entirely. People describe it as being shown the root of their addiction in vivid detail and being given the choice to let it go. Psilocybin is showing similar promise for alcohol and nicotine addiction. Not by substitution, but by creating an experience so meaningful, so reconnecting, that the substance loses its power. Because you have remembered what you were trying to find in the bottle, and you have found it somewhere real. We live in a culture that criminalized the substances used for millennia to heal and connect, and we marketed the substances that numb and sever. That is not an accident. That is a choice. A choice made by systems that benefit from disconnection. From people who do not remember they are sacred. From a population that medicates its despair instead of asking why we are in despair in the first place. And the result is what you see now. 70,000 overdose deaths a year in the United States. Most of them from fentanyl, from meth, from substances with no lineage, no wisdom, no context. We have turned away from the medicines that could actually help, and we have flooded the streets with the ones that destroy. But you cannot destroy the sacred. You can criminalize it, you can stigmatize it, you can bury the knowledge for generations, but it comes back, because it is older than governments, older than laws, older than the systems that are terrified of people who remember. They do not need those systems to be whole. The mushroom is coming back. Ayahuasca is coming back, iboga is coming back, not as escapes, but as the people who are called to that work, who are finally asking the question, what was I really looking for when I picked up that first drink, that first hit? Those people are starting to find answers that actually hold weight. If you have been in the grip of something that does not feel like it is entirely yours, if you have heard that voice at 3 in the morning and wondered where it comes from, this is your reminder. It is not all you. Some of it is. Some of it is pain that needs tending, trauma that needs space, grief that was never allowed to move, but some of it is something else, and you are allowed to say that. You are allowed to name it. You are allowed to ask for help, not just from a therapist or a doctor, but from the forces that are older and wiser than both, the ones that have been helping people heal since long before we had words like addiction or recovery. You are not broken. You are under siege. And there is a difference. One means you need to be fixed, the other means you need to be freed. And freedom starts with seeing clearly what you are up against. It starts with understanding that not all consciousness-altering substances do the same thing. That some lead you home, and some lead you so far from home you forget what home even felt like. The sacred and the profane are not interchangeable, and your life, your soul, is worth the discernment to know the difference. If this found you at the right moment, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want to keep going this deep, and I will see you in the next one.